Shari here today, and I am going to be making this fun fall interactive card using the reveal wheel in a new and different way. So I'm going to be using some images from Happy Harvest, which is my favorite set. I love the scarecrow. I'm also using a tree from the tree before and afters and this cute little dog from Let's Play. I wanted to use the dog from the Happy Halloween, but he was a little too big for what I wanted to do. So I found this little guy, and he's going to be friends with my little scarecrow here. I'm going to do Copic coloring, but I am going to be stamping with the new Crunchy Leaf ink. So this is Copic friendly, but it's a nice soft brown color. And this will give my images like a new kind of different look than that stark black. So I'm just going to do some very simple shading on these pumpkins here. And I'm doing this in super speed so you can see everything. And then my little scarecrow here, you can see I have that fall fling pad sitting there to the left. And I'm just kind of using that as my guide for my colors because I'm going to use the teal paper for the background, but I just thought this is a good go-by color scheme. Now there's no blues in this pad obviously, but he's wearing some blue jeans. He's a scarecrow. That's what they do. So I'm going in with some blues, and I'm trying to use some different colors than I tend to go with all the time. I tend to go with very bright colors. I'm trying to go with some more muted autumn colors in this card. I'm giving him kind of a burlap look to his face. Just do a little bit of shading, and I use the same marker for that shading, and I'm going to give him some little rosy cheeks. And then I picked out a green that matches the green in my fall fling paper pretty well, and that's what color I'm going to color his shirt. I tried to go with some cool colors because I'm going to use some yellow for the base of this card to make some grass, and I know that the leaves on my trees will be some warm colors too, so I'm trying to pull in some of those blues and greens on the scarecrow. Just again, doing some simple shading on my trees here. And then I'm going to go in with some not so bright colors for my leaves. And I really like how these turned out. But again, I used that fall fling paper, and I used that orange and that sort of peachy red color that's there as my go-by for my colors on the tree. And I really liked how those colors turned out. And then finally, my little dog. I'm coloring it like my little dog Penny that I miss very much, but that's kind of why I'm putting a dog on all my cards lately. But anyway, so it's going to be a little bit darker, and those lines kind of disappear a little bit. So I'm going in with a darker marker, and I'm just highlighting the eyes and the nose just so you can see that dog a little bit better. I'm going to use the coordinating dies for all of these images and cut them out. And I'm just going to put them in this little bowl to the side until we're ready to assemble the card. So I'm going to use the reveal wheel, but I'm not going to be stamping any sentiments in that wheel. I'm going to use it as a mechanism to make this little guy dance. So I'm going to use the Jenn fall fling paper in a 12 by 12. You could also use the 6 by 6, but I thought this was really nice for the sky. It's got a pattern, but it's kind of tone on tone. So it gives it a little interest, but it's not too overbearing. So I've cut the wheel and the panel out of that Jenn paper. I've also cut a panel out of some sunflower cardstock. This is going to be the grass on the bottom. So I just cut the whole panel. I don't need the whole panel, I just need the bottom, but it gives it that nice stitched edge so it's nice and finished. And then I'm going to place my scarecrow where I want him to be. So basically his head's going to kind of cover that hole. So I'm just going to use my pencil and trace that little window, and this will be my guide for where to put his head. You're not even going to have to erase this window because that's just going to get cut off, and it's just going to be a scrap piece of cardstock that you can use for later. So I'm just going to position him. I'm going to make sure he's straight up and down, and then that'll show me exactly how high to put my grass so that the post ends up behind the grass. This is kind of important because he has to be where that opening is. So you can't really move him up and down like you could if you cut the grass too short or too high. too high, you could always cut off the bottom, but you wouldn't have that nice stitched edge. Now to give the grass a little texture, kind of like my background, I thought I would stamp it with the Gingham Backdrop. I thought that was very fall-like and really went well with my scarecrow. So I'm just going to put that in my MISTI tool, lined it up with the grid, and I'm just going to pick it up on the door there. And then I'm going to put the magnet aside because I realized that my grass is going to be completely under the stamp. The magnet is completely useless. So what I'm going to do to hold it in place is just use a little bit of removable adhesive runner. So I just put a little strip of that on the back of the grass, and then I can just stick that to the little mouse pad inside there and we'll hold it in place. I'm going to use my grid to make sure it's nice and straight. And it's all going to be under that gingham stamp. I'm only going to have to stamp it once, not even worry about lining it up. So I'm using the sunflower ink on the sunflower cardstock just to give a nice tone-on-tone look. I don't want this to be too overbearing. I just want it to be a nice texture to the cardstock like a pattern paper, because I am going to be stamping my sentiment on this as well. And I went ahead and double stamped it. It looks like I didn't get it that great right there, but it actually, once it dried, it looked nice and even. I just think that looks really cool. Now to kind of give the edges some definition, I'm going in with some tumbled glass distress ink. This one matched the background pretty well, and I'm going in with a blender brush and I'm just darkening up the edges a little bit to define those edges and just give it some definition there, and it looks really great when you do this, a little added extra step to your card. I'm not going to worry about the bottom because that's going to get covered up with my grass. And then I'm going to do the same thing just to the tops of the grass with some fossilized amber, which is one of my favorite colors to use to make kind of a fall, you know, the crunchy grass where the scarecrow lives sort of thing. But you can see that really defines the edge of the grass a lot more. And it's going to look really great against that background. Now to do some assembly. So I've cut another panel of kraft cardstock with the reveal wheel without the opening cut. And this is going to be the back side of my reveal wheel sandwich. So I've got my wheel here and my other little piece that goes on the back where the foam squares go. And I am going to actually use the template that you use for stamping as a way to line it up. This is just my way of doing it to make sure it's in the right place. And the reason why I do this, especially on this one, sometimes it's hard to see those little score lines, especially on a pattern paper. So when you're shifting it in the window, you can't always see it on a pattern paper. So all you have to do is put the little template on the brad. So I got the little wheel on the back, the big wheel, the template. The brad comes through from the back side. And that white piece there is where I'm going to put my little foam squares. I usually do 3. So you're just going to pull off the backs of those so they're sticky and that adhesive is revealed. Now I'm going to use that template and line it up with the opening. So especially if you have a hard time seeing the score lines sometimes to get things lined up, the template is a great little trick. So now I could just line up that front panel while I'm holding that wheel right in place where it needs to go. I'm just going to line up the edges and stick it down. So now the wheel's in the right place. I can open the brad up. It's not going to come out because it's stuck down with those foam adhesive on the back. Take the template off and then open the brad back up. And so now my wheel is on there where it's supposed to be. Now the other thing I want to do before I put the front panel on is I want to glue a couple of these trees under the back side. These are going to go flat against that panel so that the scarecrow goes in front of the trees. But this one on this side is in my little notch where my wheel is. And I thought that it might get in the way of turning the wheel back and forth. So I'm doing a little trick here. I've got it where I want it to be. I'm going to hold it in place with some tape for a minute. I'm taking my die, I'm lining it back up where it cut. And this obviously doesn't have to be perfect, because what's going to happen is that little notch, we're going to cut it out of the tree, just so it's out of our way. But it'll have a nice finished edge. So now I can tape the tree to the die. I'm going to take the piece off that was holding it onto the back panel, and now I can just cut the tree with this die, and it'll be notched out right where it needs to be. I'm going to use some glue tube, liquid glue, to put these trees on the back. And I'm just lining up that notch and the stitching detail, so it looks like it was all cut as one piece. I'm going to go ahead and put the other tree on as well, because like I said, I want these flat onto that background panel so that my scarecrow can move in front of them. I'm just putting these pieces there so I can get the placement of the tree right. And I really like how these trees look with the scarecrow. Yeah, I use the corn stalks all the time. These kind of give them a nice new look with the fall trees in the background. I'm going to let that tree hang off the edge slightly there. And you can kind of see how that's taking shape and coming together. So now that I've got my pieces that I want flat on the back, all glued on and in place, I can put the rest together. So I've just put some foam squares around, make sure it's not in the way of the wheel, pulled off their backing, and I'm just lining it up. So now that back piece, that front piece, you can see how it's going to move. I'm going to go ahead and put this on my card base before I do any more assembly. I've got a kraft card base here. So that back piece that I sandwiched this onto is just going to disappear because it's the same color as the card base. Okay, so now it's time to put our little scarecrow on and make him dance around. He's going to be held on by one foam square right in the center of that arched opening. So I'm just going to put that foam square right in the middle so he can move back and forth. That foam square will kind of be a bumper and stop him from going all the way around, obviously. Then you want to make sure you put that foam square right in the middle of his head. So just line him up, make sure he's up and down. I'm putting my grass back so that I don't get him too high. So that foam square is kind of in the middle of his hat. And now he's in place and he can move back and forth right in front of those trees. All right, to finish off, we're going to do all the stuff in the front here. So I'm going to pop up this whole piece with the grass with some foam tape so that it's in front of the scarecrow and he's got plenty of room to kind of swing behind it. So I'm going to go ahead and use some glue to put down the pieces that are going to be attached to that. And the reason why I'm doing this first is so I have their placement and then I can stamp the sentiment before I put this on the card. I'm going to be using the So Thankful sentiment from the Jump for Joy stamp set. So I've used a lot of sets on this card actually. I think I'm up to 5. So I'm just going to hold it in place with that magnet. There's that So Thankful stamp. And I decided I wanted to stamp it in some walnut ink so that it kind of goes along with this softer tone and the browns that I've got going on in my card. So I'm just going to line that up. And that gingham actually makes that pretty easy to line up straight. Pick it up with the MISTI door. I realized this magnet was actually a little too big because it was too close. I'm just going to grab the smaller magnet just to hold it in place. So I thought about the black, decided that was going to be too stark, and so I'm going to go with the walnut ink. So I'm just going to ink up that sentiment and stamp it right onto that grass. Just so cute. I love the kind of scripty font of that sentiment, and it size very well. So I'm just adding some foam tape. I made sure that that tape is not in the way of the little scarecrow's post. That's what I'm checking there with it upside down. And then I can pull off the backer and stick that right on there, lining it up with the bottom so it's got that nice stitched edge on this part as well. And he swings back and forth right behind those pumpkins and that dog. And you can't see the end of his post because I put those elements in the front. Now, we don't have an arrow that goes both ways, so I'm just going to draw my own arrow in with a brown pen. So this tells the recipient to, instead of spinning it, to move him back and forth. How fun is that? So here's another look at the card with the scarecrow that's dancing and swinging back and forth. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.